So it's just before 8 in the morning, and yet another beautiful day is about to bless the people of Hawaii. As the day starts, Commander Logan C. Ramsey takes a sip of his first coffee. He's enjoying the mild aroma filling the room when he spots a low-flying plane zooming overhead. Before Ramsey gives his sighting any further thought, the plane drops a bomb. Immediately, the closest radio man frantically sends a message: "Air raid on Pearl Harbor." This is no drill. The battle has just begun. But to understand how we got here, we need to rewind a bit. It's late autumn 1939, dull, rainy weather. President Franklin Delano Roosevelt is approaching the end of the second term, and he's managed to successfully endure a truly unsettling decade that followed the great crisis of 1929. The social unrest is mostly in the past, and the economy seems to be getting back on track. But Roosevelt can't just breathe easy because, from the American perspective, world politics look just as grim as the gray weather beyond his windows. What's happening in other parts of the world has Roosevelt and a lot of the American elite seriously concerned as their country steers away from its long-standing policy of isolationism. This is the story of how everything led to that fateful Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941. Chapter 1, The Road to War. Rising tensions. To the west, the fast rate of changes happening in Japan, which has followed the path of militarism, are in stark contrast with what Congress and the President want. Distressed, they've made attempts to change the course of the Japanese Empire using increasingly strict measures, like relocating the U.S. Pacific Fleet from San Diego to Hawaii and making use of trade restrictions. But as it soon turns out, these actions only throw more oil on the bonfire. You could commend America's peacekeeping efforts, sure, but from Japan's perspective, which by this time has basically become a one-party state controlled by the Army, the United States and its allies are severely limiting the growth of the Japanese Empire. Allied military bases and colonies in the Pacific, along with American policies to interfere in Japan's affairs, are clear signs that U.S. neutrality is by then only theoretical. In fact, the Americans are actively playing against Japan's imperialist plans. Both countries are visibly on a collision course, and things really heat up in the summer of 1941 when the United States imposes another severe embargo that bans oil shipments to Japan, which relies heavily on imported resources. Since vital petroleum comes mostly from the States, this latest embargo puts the Japanese economy and War Department in serious trouble. At this point, the Japanese government has two viable options: submit to American demands and place the dreams of Great Japan on the shelf, or pursue a course to attain self-sufficiency and try seizing British Malaya and the Dutch East Indies, both rich in strategic resources. The first option gets summarily dismissed, but the second, more tempting one, presents some significant issues. The strategic gamble. Japanese war planners figured that attacking Southeast Asia would inevitably result in an American response, possibly from the nearby Philippines, which for that very reason would also become a target. It seems that pursuing this policy of aggression equals going to war with the United States. And if that's going to happen, Japanese war planners appear to be far more level-headed compared to those dabbling with politics. For those admirals, it's clear that any drawn-out conflict with the United States would spell disaster for Japan. The only chance for victory lies in crippling the American Pacific Fleet in a surprise blow and forcing the states into a negotiated peace, which would give Japan a free hand in Southeast Asia. A bold strategy indeed. The Japanese have already started the groundwork for this many months prior, relying heavily on the capabilities of Admiral Yamamoto, who serves as chief of the combined fleet. The grand plan envisions coordinated attacks on many objectives in Southeast Asia and American military bases in the Pacific. The Hawaiian naval base at Pearl Harbor is deemed the most critical because, according to intelligence reports, it's home to the largest warships of the United States Pacific Fleet. For that reason, the very first and most important blow is to be dealt in Hawaii. On the morning of November 26, the combined fleet, representing the main component of the Imperial Japanese Navy under the command of Vice Admiral Nagumo, departs the foggy Kurile Islands in utmost secrecy and takes an easterly direction towards Hawaii. For the next 12 days, a force of 6 aircraft carriers escorted by 2 battleships, 3 cruisers, and some additional vessels steams through the North Pacific, eventually reaching its position northwest of the archipelago roughly an hour before daybreak of December 7th. Chapter 2, The Attack. The Calm Before the Storm. It's a fair, unremarkable Sunday morning at Pearl Harbor Naval Base. As you'd expect from a Sunday morning, it's unsurprisingly quiet, and many of those who are on shore leave have either thought about breakfast or are nursing a hangover. Though war with Japan is looming on the horizon and is generally anticipated by many, Pearl is presumed to be too well defended to be considered a target. If anything, it could be a naval attack followed by a full invasion force, or possibly some kind of sabotage. But the Japanese attacking Pearl by air? No one truly believes it. Even high-ranking officers who command the base seem to disregard the standard warnings they receive and do little to mitigate the threat of a Japanese attack. But soon, the Americans would pointedly learn how dead wrong they were, as the sky swarms with hundreds of enemy planes. The first wave. At last, the monotonous rumble of radio engines can be heard on Oahu. The very first targets of the Japanese attack are American air bases scattered over the island. Seeking to prevent possible retaliation, both Aichi D-3A dive bombers and famous Mitsubishi A-6M fighters, commonly known as Zeros, rained down fire upon the completely unprepared Americans, shredding planes and bombing air installations. To avoid possible sabotage, the aircraft have been ordered to be packed tightly together, which obviously only adds to the ensuing mayhem. But this surprise blow is just a taste of what's to come. Having secured the skies from the threat of American planes, the Japanese are able to fly the vulnerable carrier-based torpedo bombers over the main objective of Pearl Harbor. The first Nakajima B-5M bombers arrive on the scene, instantly focusing on the ships moored northwest of Ford Island. 6 bombers drop torpedoes against USS Utah, an old dreadnought-turned-training ship. Out of the 6 torpedoes launched, 2 hit Utah and 1 accidentally hits the nearby light cruiser USS Raleigh. Although Utah quickly rolls over and sinks, the Raleigh is saved from capsizing by the steady actions of her crew. The majority of Japanese bombers pull up the circle around and get into position to attack the much-coveted battleship row. Numerous valuable targets are berthed there, but the most vulnerable to torpedo attack are 2 outboard ones, the battleships Oklahoma and West Virginia. Eventually, Nakajima bombers approach from the southeast, and a number of projectiles hit both ships. Each ship is hammered by blow after blow, despite increasing anti-aircraft fire that manages to shoot down a couple of the slow torpedo bombers. The West Virginia, hit by 7 torpedoes, is barely afloat. The Oklahoma, hit by 9, slowly capsizes with many men trapped under her deck. The Arizona's fate. A following group of Nakajima planes, this time in horizontal bomber configuration, strikes from the southwest. The inboard vessels, up until this moment protected from torpedo attacks, are vulnerable to level bombing runs. Multiple direct hits are scored on the Maryland, Tennessee, and Arizona. 1 bomb pierces the armor of the unfortunate Arizona and ignites the forward magazine of the warship. Seconds later, a massive fireball erupts like a volcano, destroying the battleship and setting fire to the nearby repair vessel. Chaos mounts at Pearl Harbor as the remainder of the Japanese warplanes depart the scene. Damage control parties are in full motion. Others scramble to put out fires, help the wounded, and man their posts, but there's little respite from the air strikes. The second wave. Less than 30 minutes later, a second wave is inbound, about to hit the island. This time, the naval base at Pearl Harbor is marginally better prepared, but this is well anticipated by the Japanese, and the configuration of the second attack differs from before. The element of surprise is already spent, so there's little point using torpedo aircraft anymore. The task of harming the ships is now passed to Aichi dive bombers, each armed with a single 250 kilograms explosive. By the time the second wave arrives, the USS Nevada, though hit earlier by a torpedo, is already underway, being the only vessel in battleship row not moored and able to maneuver. Seeing her moving down the channel to the harbor entrance, many dive bombers concentrate their efforts on the Nevada. Over the next 20 minutes, she's subjected to persistent attacks as the Aichi dive bombers strike the slowly moving battleship in hopes of sinking her and blocking the inlet. The Nevada sustains a majority of damage to her superstructure and ultimately, at 10 minutes past 9 a.m., she's intentionally beached to prevent her sinking in deeper waters. Though American battleships are the secondary targets for the dive bombers, a number of well-trained pilots of the second wave focus on the docked USS Pennsylvania, notably missed by the first attack. Yet by 9 a.m., American resistance is becoming more effective. Heavier anti-aircraft fire renders the Japanese strikes chaotic and less coordinated compared to the first wave. The aftermath, as the last plane returns to the aircraft carriers, the result of the second wave, all factors considered, are only deemed acceptable. Less than 2 hours after the first strike, the naval base of Pearl Harbor is awash with twisted metal, burning oil, and the ringing cries of the wounded and dying. For battleships are sunk. Many other ships either go down or sustain various degrees of damage. Almost 200 planes are destroyed, the majority of them still on the ground. More than 2,300 U.S. military personnel are killed with many more wounded. The American losses are substantial, especially given the light casualties conceded by the Japanese. The Imperial Navy succeeds in crippling the battle line of the U.S. Pacific Fleet, and for a time can claim unrestricted freedom in the Pacific, free to execute their ambitious plans. But unfortunately for them, none of the American aircraft carriers are even present at Pearl during the enemy's storm. Their absence quickly proves to be vital, as the age of carrier-based air power is about to dramatically change naval warfare in the time to come, as the Japanese have shown themselves at Pearl Harbor. The attack, though quite successful on an operational level and very useful for Japanese propaganda, brings them little gain in the grand scheme of things. The real consequences, feared by many more sensible Japanese, are still to come. From this day forth, the events at Pearl Harbor sway American public opinion in favor of war with Japan. Consequently, the rust-covered wheels of the American military industry, basically dormant for many years, are set in motion. As the popular phrase goes, the sleeping giant is awakening. December 7, 1941, would live in infamy. The Japanese had won a tactical victory, but they'd also awakened a force that would ultimately bring about their defeat. The road to the end of World War II in the Pacific had begun. Right here, on this beautiful Sunday morning in Hawaii that turned into a nightmare of fire and death.